As the Hydra agents roughly dragged the two surviving terrorists inside the bunker, another operative took the wheel of the stolen SUV, guiding it toward a makeshift garage adjacent to the facility. The heavy steel doors slid shut behind them with a deep metallic groan, sealing them off from the outside world. Tony remained motionless, a ghost in the back seat, watching through his suit's HUD as his cloak drones silently detached from their compartments and hovered into action. One drone, equipped with high-resolution optics, tailed Madame Viper and the prisoners, its sensors recording every detail of the facility's interior. The other two split off, scanning the perimeter and discreetly mapping out the structure's layout. As they moved deeper into the facility, Tony's eyes narrowed at the tech on display. He had expected a heavily digitized setup, something he could easily infiltrate and manipulate. But what he saw instead made his stomach twist with irritation. HYDRA had learned the usual weak points: wireless networks, cloud-based surveillance, and remote-controlled defenses were nowhere to be found. Instead, the facility operated on a patchwork of analog and optical fiber-based systems. Everything critical was air-gapped, isolated from outside interference, making remote hacking impossible. Old-school mechanical locks replaced biometric scanners, and encrypted hardlines ran through the walls like veins, ensuring no digital signals could be intercepted. Tony clenched his jaw. "Clever bastards," he muttered under his breath. Zola's AI had adapted. It must have analyzed past breaches, tracing them back to external hacks that compromised HYDRA's entire network. Now, HYDRA was using a hybrid defense system. It was an infuriating mix of old and new, designed specifically to counter someone like him. He needed another way in. Inside the bunker, the two prisoners were shoved into metal chairs, their wrists locked into thick steel cuffs bolted to the floor. Madame Viper sauntered in front of them, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. "Now," she purred, "let's see if you're worth keeping alive." Tony watched through his drone's feed, carefully analyzing her movements. Viper was no fool. If she was here, that meant this location was important. It wasn't just some random hideout, it was a core piece of HYDRA's resurgence. And she might know the location of Zola AI. So, killing her wasn't an option. He needed her alive. He turned his focus to his other drones, studying the facility's blueprints as they pieced together a virtual layout. Multiple underground levels, thick reinforced walls, old-fashioned security checkpoints, and somewhere, deep inside, the mainframe. If he could get inside physically, he could still find a way to break through, but first, he needed an entry point, and more importantly, he needed to make sure Viper didn't suspect a thing. Tony smirked. "Time to get creative. If I can't find a solution, I'll do it the old-school way. Kill them all and interrogate that bitch." Madame Viper tapped her gloved fingers against the hilt of the knife at her hip, watching the two prisoners with an amused smirk. "Now, tell me," she drawled, tilting her head, "who killed your entire team?" Scar swallowed hard, his muscles tensing. The other man, still gripping his sore wrists, glanced around the room. They knew they were trapped. But before either of them could utter a single word, bzzzt, both men suddenly convulsed, their eyes rolling back as their bodies seized violently. A faint sizzling sound crackled through their skulls, and within seconds, their bodies slumped lifelessly in their chairs. A faint whiff of burnt tissue filled the air. "Brain dead," Viper blinked, her smirk faltering. The guards stiffened, stepping forward in alarm. "The hell?" one of them muttered, nudging Scar's motionless body with his rifle. No response. Viper's eyes narrowed. Her instincts screamed that something was wrong. "Check their vitals," she ordered coldly. A guard pulled out a scanner, placing it against Scar's neck. The display blinked red. No brain activity. The same result came from the second prisoner. "They're dead," the guard confirmed, baffled. "Both of them. Just like that." Viper exhaled through her nose, her lips pressing into a thin line. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone had just silenced them before she could extract any information. "They are here in this base, watching us." She looked around. "Initiate the agent number count," she snapped. And double the security. There is a rat or rats among us. Capture them alive. As the HYDRA agent scrambled to comply, Tony was already several steps ahead. Still cloaked in the garage, he watched the scene unfold through his drone's feed, allowing himself the slightest smirk. Stupid bitch should have checked the car first. Well, that takes care of that. Now, on to the next step. His other drones were already deep inside the facility, slipping undetected through ventilation shafts, bypassing locked doors and security checkpoints. The goal? The power mainframe. The facility was using a complex mix of analog and fiber optic systems, but even the most paranoid security setups had one common weakness: power distribution. If Tony could get to the mainframe, he could disrupt their infrastructure, create his own backdoor, and most importantly, cripple the entire operation if things went south. The drones whirred softly as they navigated the tight ducts, their microsensors mapping every inch of the facility. A cluster of heavily armed guards patrolled the main corridors, and several checkpoints had reinforced blast doors that wouldn't be easy to breach, but that didn't matter. Tony's drones were too small and invisible to be noticed. They slipped through vents, weaving through the labyrinth of air shafts until they reached a large, secured chamber. Bingo! The power mainframe was a reinforced room filled with thick industrial conduits, cooling units, and an array of analog switches lined along the walls. It was the control center for everything in this facility, but Tony frowned as he analyzed the setup. Damn. HYDRA really had gone old school. There were no digital ports and no remote access nodes. Everything was controlled manually through a network of insulated relays and switches. Even the circuit breakers were locked behind mechanical barriers. Zola's AI had ensured that no external hacking could penetrate this fortress, but Tony Stark wasn't just any hacker. He smirked. If I can't hack my way in, I'll just have to break it the old-fashioned way. His drones dispersed, scanning for vulnerabilities. They found them quickly: coolant pipes running too close to key transformers, a pressure release valve that could be overloaded, and most importantly, an emergency failsafe system that, if triggered, would force a facility-wide lockdown. He could use this. He got out of the car and waited for the perfect opportunity. Tony exhaled slowly, flexing his fingers as he watched the facility's main gate slide open from his position in the garage. A trio of HYDRA patrol guards stepped through, rifles slung over their shoulders, murmuring among themselves about the sudden security increase. This was his chance. Tony activated his suit's silent propulsion system, slipping into the facility behind them. He was invisible. The guards continued down the hall, oblivious to the silent predator trailing behind them. Tony took in every detail: overlapping patrol routes, security cameras mounted at blind angles, and thick reinforced doors blocking deeper access points. 50 agents. Maybe more. He smirked. Could have been a fair fight if I were feeling generous, but stealth was the name of the game tonight. As the patrol reached an intersection, they split off. Two turned left, the other kept walking toward an access panel to input his security credentials. Tony seized the moment. There were no cameras around that area. His arm blurred as he lashed out with a nanite-clad hand, clamping over the lone guard's mouth and pulling him into the shadows. A muffled grunt, a quick pulse of an electrified gauntlet, and the guard's body went limp. Tony caught him effortlessly, dragging him behind a stack of metal crates. He scanned the guard's uniform and his suit was reshaped into a perfect replica of the HYDRA uniform. Moments later, he stepped out, fully disguised. Helmet on, visor dark, and that guard's gun. It's like playing the Hitman game. Command Center. Madame Viper tapped her polished nails against the steel console, her emerald eyes scanning the live security feeds with cold precision. This doesn't add up, she muttered, narrowing her gaze at the motionless bodies of the two dead prisoners. Someone wanted them silenced. And whoever it is, they're already inside. A HYDRA officer approached, saluting crisply. Agent count is complete. No discrepancies. Viper's lips curled downward. Of course, there aren't. If our intruder is competent, they wouldn't be foolish enough to replace an existing agent. They would be a ghost. Her grip tightened around the console as she turned to the officer. Shut down all external access points. Lock down the power grid. If we have a rat, they won't be leaving this base alive. Lower level, power mainframe, Tony smirked as he received the transmission from his drone. Exactly what I wanted. Hydra had just activated their own cage. His drones, using pinpoint plasma cutters, targeted the emergency failsafe system. Bzztchhk. The moment the failsafe was triggered, a loud warning announcement blared throughout the facility. Thick blast doors slammed shut across every section, sealing off corridors and locking personnel in their designated zones. Emergency red lights pulsed violently as automated security protocols engaged. The facility was in chaos. Thick steel blast doors had slammed shut, isolating squads of Hydra agents into separate sections. The emergency klaxons wailed, red lights pulsing along the narrow corridors. Some guards frantically checked their radios, barking for status reports, only to receive static. Others held their rifles tight, scanning the dimly lit hallways with growing paranoia. Tony walked among them, a phantom clad in stolen Hydra gear, visor down, rifle slung over his shoulder. He moved carefully, never rushing, never hesitating, just another faceless soldier obeying the lockdown protocol. To think they built something like this out in the open, no one questioned him, and that would be their first mistake. 2 Hydra guards stood by a security checkpoint, muttering under their breath. Their fingers rested near their triggers, nerves taut. The sudden lockdown had rattled them. Tony approached with measured steps, stopping just short of their line of sight. He examined the environment. A large industrial pipe ran along the ceiling, marked with faded yellow warning labels, high-pressure steam. A maintenance panel was bolted near the corner. He had an idea. His nanites shifted into a small multi-tool and he unscrewed the bolts silently. 1, 2, 3. The last bolt came loose. He placed a small explosive. It would just make a pop sound, but powerful enough to crack the unstable joint. Alrighty. The moment the panel shifted, the pipe groaned. Steam hissed from the growing crack, building pressure. Tony took a step back and waited and threw the bolts on the ground near the pipe point. One of the guards noticed. "Hey, you hear that?" The taller one turned, brow furrowing. He nudged his partner. "Check it out." The second guard hesitated, then stepped forward. As soon as he reached the loose panel, Tony activated the explosive. Pop. Hisses. FWWWWOSH, superheated steam blasted from the fractured pipe, enveloping the guard's face in a scalding cloud. Arg! A garbled scream tore from his throat, skin blistering instantly. He fell to the floor, squirming like a worm. What the fuck? His partner recoiled, eyes wide in horror. Tony was already moving. He walked behind the second guard and wrapped an arm around his throat, cutting off his scream. The man struggled, kicking wildly, but Tony's grip was ironclad. He held firm until the man's body went limp. He then walked to the first one. The guard was still twitching, his face melted beyond recognition, steam still hissing from his ruined skin. Well, he died after twitching for a bit. 2 down, Tony dragged the dead bodies to the room on his right and dumped them inside a big garbage drum. Then he went back and flicked the loose panel back into place, sealing the breach. No witnesses. No evidence. Further down the corridor, another Hydra operative patrolled alone, checking the secured doors. He had his rifle at the ready but was distracted, grumbling about the sudden lockdown. Tony stalked him from above. He moved across a maintenance walkway, silent as a shadow. Every step was calculated. The metal grates beneath him barely made any sound under his weight. He watched the guard's movements, analyzing his route. The timing had to be perfect. As the guard stopped beneath an overhead support beam, Tony activated his invisible mode and flew down behind the guard. Then he reached carefully unclipped the man's holster. The guard stiffened. What the? Tony didn't let him finish. He punched the guard's throat to stop him from making noise. Then he grabbed the guard's throat and flew up. Tony hovered in the air. The man's boots scraped against the floor as he was lifted off his feet, hands clawing at Tony's arms, but all his nails scratched was the armor on his hand. Tony twisted. Crack, the neck snapped clean. Tony took the body and shoved it into a maintenance alcove. The shadows swallowed it whole. No alarms. No blood. Just another missing agent. Time to hunt my next target. 2 more guards were stationed in a narrow corridor, standing near an exposed electrical junction box. They were deep in conversation, oblivious. Tony crouched near the edge of the hallway, eyes scanning the area. The junction box was old, covered in layers of dust and rust, with thick cables snaking out of it. A quick scan with his HUD showed high voltage. Perfect. Tony unslung his rifle and took aim, not at the guards, but at the ceiling above them. A single suppressed shot rang out, striking a loose ventilation grate. Clang, the guards snapped their heads up. The hell was that? One stepped forward cautiously. The other reached for his radio. Tony made his move. He lunged from the shadows, grabbing the first guard and shoving him violently against the exposed junction box. His body seized as thousands of volts surged through him. His partner barely had time to react before Tony punched his throat, breaking his windpipe, and kicked his knee out, forcing him down. He grabbed the second guard's face and slammed it against the crackling wires. Sparks danced. The smell of burnt flesh filled the air. Wow. Roasted meat. Arg. Now, burnt meat. Their bodies jerked, then fell still. Tony stepped back, watching the lights flicker for a brief moment before stabilizing. Once again, no alarms. He kept moving. A lone officer hurried through a side passage, likely heading for the command center. Unlike the others, this one had rank. Tony could tell by the insignia on his uniform that made him valuable. Tony moved fast, trailing him through the dim corridors. His nanites shifted and formed a knife. The officer didn't sense the danger until it was too late. A firm grip on his shoulder. A knife to his throat. The officer choked, hands clawing at the blade pressing against his jugular. "Shoo," Tony whispered in his ear. "You make a sound, and you die painfully." The officer whimpered. "Where's Viper?" The officer hesitated. Tony pressed the blade deeper. A bead of blood trickled down his neck. Level 3, he stammered. "Security W-wing." Tony exhaled. "Good boy." Then he twisted the knife. The officer's body slumped into the shadows. Tony decided to kill all the HYDRA agents first, so he just did that. He was stealthy about it too. He killed all the guards on the first 2 levels with environmental accidents and stealth takedown and hid the bodies all over the base. Then he made his way to the 3rd level. The security wing was close now. He could see it, reinforced doors, an additional squad of HYDRA operatives stationed nearby. Viper was inside. Tony tried to check through the wall, but couldn't. It was made of special material. TSK, gotta tweak the visor later. He needed one last play. Tony spotted a fire suppression system near the ceiling. It was one of the few systems still operational. He simply shot at the sensor from the shadows. Bzzzt, the fire alarm shrieked, panic. The guards flinched, distracted by the sudden blare. That was all he needed. Create image with this text. Tony moved like a ghost, gliding through the chaos, silencing each guard before they even realized what was happening. A knife to the throat. A snapped neck. A precise strike to the temple. By the time the alarm died down, the security wing was drenched in silence. Tony stepped toward the door and placed his palm against the control panel. His suit's interface worked its magic. Access granted. The security wing was eerily silent. The heavy blast door hissed open, revealing a scene Tony hadn't expected. Bodies littered the floor, contorted in ways that told of brutal efficiency. Limbs bent at unnatural angles. Necks twisted sharply. Some corpses bore scorch marks from electrified weapons, while others had crushed throats, their faces frozen in mid-scream. Tony stepped inside cautiously, his visor scanning the room. No gunfire residue. No spent casings. No alarms were triggered during the fight. These people never had a chance to shoot back. His gaze landed on the centerpiece of the massacre, Madame Viper. She sat slumped against the far wall. She was wearing her black leather outfit. A whip dangled from her stiff fingers, coiled uselessly. But it was her face that drew Tony's attention. Her eyes were gone. Tony exhaled sharply. Interesting. He crouched beside her body, his HUD running a forensic scan. No sign of hesitation wounds. Whoever did this went for maximum efficiency, quick, brutal takedowns, no wasted movements. The patterns were too familiar. He'd seen this before. He turned to the nearest dead operative, rolling the body slightly. Burn marks on the chest. Small, circular entry points. High-voltage electric darts. And the joint breaks. Tony's lips pressed into a thin line. Baton strikes. Classic. His fingers tapped against his thigh as the realization settled in. The crushed windpipes, the broken clavicles, the calculated brutality. This was a very particular kind of fight. One that only a handful of people in the world could execute with such ruthless precision, and he knew one of them very well. Nat. It had to be her. No one else had this exact blend of skills. Fast. Precise. Overwhelming in close quarters. She hadn't just killed them, she had humiliated them. None of these guys even got a shot off, but why take Viper's eyes? Tony frowned, standing up and scanning the rest of the room. If it was Natasha, she was already gone. No lingering traces, no accidental footprints. Nothing. She had come, done her job, and disappeared like a ghost. That he looked up and saw a broken vent. Ha 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 ha. Dang. Well. A pro is a pro. I'll give her that. She must have seen the car and followed me here, or she was on a side mission. And the eyes. If I were to guess, her eyes must open something good. Something like a vault or doors, and whatever lies beyond that must be very valuable. Now what does Hydra have that's so valuable that the Black Widow would risk infiltrating an enemy base? A new strain of SSS? Tesseract? Or Zola AI? Tony quickly did another scan of the room. He wanted to extract some data, but he noticed that everything was wiped clean. So, without wasting any time, he went to the armory and placed a nanite bomb. Then he went out of the base and flew high up in the air and activated the bomb. Boom. The ground shook from the blast as the facility was engulfed in a fiery explosion. The flames roared, swallowing anything in their path, metal bending and melting under the extreme heat. Debris flew everywhere, crashing through the surrounding forest. Tony watched it all burn, then flew away. Somewhere far away, a woman in a black suit watched as the base exploded. Her long hair fluttered in the breeze. Her face was covered by a black mask, leaving only her piercing green eyes exposed. Her phone rang. She took the call. Mission successful. But there was someone other than me who was after Viper. Whoever that was, blew up the base. Good job, a male voice said on the other end of the line. Now go back to your previous assignment. We'll send another widow to check up on our unknown friend. Yes, sir. The line went dead. The woman lowered her phone and walked away from the burning base. She vanished into the night. This story continues. Subscribe to the channel for the remaining episodes. Thank you for watching and liking the channel.